Should I at least should we at least tell people on YouTube?
Yeah, I want to
Oh,
see if it
Yeah,
works
Yeah,
first
they've told
before.
them already.
just
okay.
did.
Let's see, we have 16 people waiting.
Yeah, it says it's setting up, but it's progress bars. There we go. Sharing in the chat. 1 second.
Oh, I see the green streamy icon.
Setting up, but it's progress bars. There we go.
Okay, awesome. So this now I'll share in the chat here.
Where are we live? I don't.
So we're live on this new link on YouTube. And I'm just sharing
Different
it
link?
around with all the
This link?
events. Yeah, the link that Ashley sent.
Okay, I see us now.
Oh, I see us live.
You know what? I'm going to actually put that in the Facebook group so people know.
Just did.
Oh, you
You can
just
go
did.
ahead.
You beat me
You
to
can
it.
go ahead and get started, Raul, or let's give it a minute.
Yeah, give it like a minute because
Sure.
I bet there's probably a lot of confusion right now.
Sure.
There's probably still a lot of people on that other link.
Do you want to quickly share something with the Instagram?
Do I have my? Let me see if I
Let's see
can.
if I can get to my
Let's see if this works. We are live now. Make sure the right link went through. Oh, Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it's not loading on my phone, but it does say 11 people watching now, so I'm assuming it's the right link.
Great.
On Instagram
Awesome.
now.
Awesome. And we finished uploading the links for the groups, so we're good to go. So yeah, this
Okay.
is the first of a series of events with Blue Collar Post Collective, organized by the New York City Committee. Raul, do you want to introduce everyone?
Yeah, I just thank you all so much for coming here today. We're very, very pleased that you have decided to spend some time with us, and hang out with some of your fellow peers in the post-production community. I very much apologize for all of those technical difficulties and confusion with the links and whatnot, but it looks like we got everything settled now, so we're just gonna get going. So anyway, hello everyone. My name is Raul, and I'm one of your committee members for the New York City chapter of Blue Collar Post Collective. And yeah, I'm here along with Becky and Steve, who I'm like so thrilled to be spending some time with. And before we get going, I do want to announce that if you're in the New York City area, we will be having our monthly meetup this coming Monday, September 30th from 7 to 10 p.m. at our usual meetup spot, which is, in case you haven't been, that is the Peculiar Pub, which is on 145 Bleecker Street in New York City. So please come on by. I'm always there. Becky's usually always there, and we have a great time.
Oh yeah,
For
we
those of
picked a
you,
great dive
yes,
bar. Yeah,
yes, it's
it's a good
great.
time.
For those of you not in New York City, for those of you who are in Los Angeles, our next meetup is going to be on October 19th at St. Felix in the Powder Room, which is at 1606 Cahuenga Boulevard in Los Angeles at 6 p.m. So please come on by, meet your fellow peers at either of these events. We'd love to see you. And our goal at Blue Collar Post Collective is to just make the post-production community much smaller and more together. And going to these meetups is a perfect opportunity to do that. So, with that in mind, we will get started.
And
Also, I do want to let you guys know, I'm sorry, were you gonna?
go ahead.
No, I do want to let you guys know that we will be leaving some time to take your live audience questions at the end. So please feel free to fire those in at any point, and we will get to as many of those as we can.
So as Raoul was saying, the in-person meetups for community building, absolutely. But we do also want to organize more virtual panels and professional development sessions like this to kind of inspire us all. It is a difficult time now in the industry. That's a lot of what the discussions are, both on the Facebook and in-person sessions. So we thought who better to speak than someone who's spoken to seemingly every major editor that there is.
Yes.
Steve Hullfish, if there's someone who can, put himself out there and learn from his group and his community, it's Steve. Thank you for joining us today, Steve.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to hear the questions and provide any kind of wisdom that I can, mostly from the people I've interviewed more than from me.
Yeah, but you provide a lot of wisdom yourself as
Thank you.
well. You are a working editor in addition to being the author of these several well-received post-production books. For those of you watching who may not have known, he has been an editor since the 80s. He's worked on The Oprah Winfrey Show and Gravesend, and feature films such as Courageous, War Room, and Overcomer, and he's also a teacher as well. So we are very excited to have this chat with you today. And again, just thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak to us.
Oh, I'm happy to do it.
And
Let's get to
Steve,
some
what are
questions,
you?
and I'm interested to hear from everybody who's watching too.
Yeah, go ahead,
Oh,
Raoul.
yeah.
Kick off.
So yeah, just to kick it right off, we're here. Art of the Cut Volume 2 was recently released not too long ago. And of course, it is the follow-up to the very successful first edition of Art of the Cut, which I believe was published back in 2017. And it's a very, very informative book. It has been of value to several folks who work in post-production. So what I think a lot of us are curious to know is what was your inspiration for initially going forward with such a massive undertaking? Was it shaped at all by any of your experiences working as an editor, but also as a teacher? Did you feel that there was any need for students to better understand like how the editing process works and stuff like that?
I think it's important for everybody to understand how the editing process works, from directors to other people on the crew, from fellow professionals that maybe aren't in scripted television. Um, I thought that there was a lot to offer. The first book came from 52 interviews, I think, that I'd done at that point, about a year's worth of interviews. And I just received so much really good information from the 300 interviews I've done since then that I thought that it was worth another book. It was more along the lines of there's so much good stuff. I have to get this out. That was really the impetus more than anything else.
Mhm. No, that's terrific. And that kind of answers what I was going to ask you next, because the first art of the cut out when the first art of the cut came out, it was widely acclaimed. You know, it seemed like almost every editor on the planet was talking about it. And after that book was like such a huge success, I did want to know like at what point were you like, okay, it's like when's the time to expand on this? Like, what can I do to improve on it? Were you noticing any shifts in the industry or advancements in editing that made you want to go back and expand upon what you accomplished in part one?
The biggest change in the industry happened because of COVID. It was the facilitation of remote work, essentially. I mean, that was one of the biggest things. And that has a few implications. One of them is it allows so many more people to get into the industry in some ways, because now you're not completely limited to basically New York and LA. You can work in Chicago and you can work other places. Assistants are the same way. I just did an interview with New York City editor Jamie Kirkpatrick, and his assistant was in a different state. The problem with that is that the assistant is in a different state, right? They're not right next to the editor to be able to learn and to be able to sit in with a director, for example. And so I feel like the book is offers kind of a collective wisdom that is perhaps being lost because there's so much remote work and assistants are not right there with their editors anymore, learning kind of at their feet. I think I don't have a copy, believe it or not, with me right now, but I think one of the fluff quotes, as they call them, on the first page of the book is from Joe Walker, who, thank you, Becky. Becky can read Joe's quote for us, which basically
Which
talks
page
about
of
it.
your own book, Steve? Is it? You
I
can
don't
borrow
have
mine.
one.
Don't
I
worry.
just gave away my copy to a film student in Chicago here.
Joe Walker, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. In Art of the Cut, Steve amasses such an arsenal of advice. It reminds me of something I was lucky enough to experience as an assistant, a corridor of benevolent editors sharing wisdom born of decades.
There you go. So that's what I felt like I needed to do.
And that you accomplished that in a fantastic way.
Thank you.
I was reading this book over the past couple of weeks, and I just found like so much varied insight, the things that I never would have thought about. But what surprised me the most was just how what big difference there is between ideologies from one editor to another editor. There's a lot of things where I was just like, oh, okay, like this organization of bins, for example, that's like a common sense, one way to do it type of thing. But then we have like someone talking about, no, I like it this way and this way only, and that's very different from what other editors say. So wow, I was like, that really like opened my mind to like how many different ways you can do things.
Well, I've heard it said before that that oh, everybody's different, every job is different, every producer, every editor will ask you to do things a different way, but actually having anecdotes that are detailed through your book, knowing exactly what those options are. So if you
Hmm.
are in a position of being an AE and you're like troubleshooting, say your editor is wanting to do things differently, but they don't know how, you can use this book to suggest things to them. Do you hope this book is somewhat like that, like a solutions guide for A's?
I certainly hope it's a solutions guide. The other thing that I want it to be is, if you've got some crazy idea about how to organize your bins, I also want you to say, there's nothing crazy about that. This Oscar winner does it this way. This Oscar winner does it this totally different way. They both edit great. Why doesn't my way work? It can. We do not all work the same. So if you want to work in
right.
some totally different way and some totally different approach, feel free, feel enabled. You can feel enabled by your own creative path, but you can also go, oh, here's how this person does it. I could steal that. Here's how this person does it. I could steal that. My approach to editing changes almost with every interview. I'm like, ooh, I got to try that. What that person suggested, that's really interesting. And sometimes I try it and go, not for me. And sometimes I try and go, that's life-changing. That's awesome. And I adopt it and I keep using it. So I hope that that's the way people use the book.
Awesome. We have a question from YouTube.
Great.
Let's keep it dynamic and read them out as they come. Raul, do you want to read this
Okay,
question out?
no, let's do it. Let's do it. Yes, I see we have a question from Suzette, who based in Atlanta. Shout out to Atlanta, by the way. Like so many great productions and people over there
Amen.
right now.
Maisie Hoy
Yeah,
is down
so
there all the time.
yes. Yeah, so Suzette wants to know, since you have interviewed so many high-level skilled editors and you are one yourself, what was the most common trait that you noticed between all of you?
Ooh, I love that question. It's a great question, Suzette. I found two of them. One is, well, let's go with three. I found three really good common traits amongst the editors that I've talked to, in no particular order. One is patience. It is an ability to realize that the work that you're doing today does not have to be perfect and that you have weeks or months in order to perfect that work. And I have always been impatient and thought it has to be perfect the first day, but that's just impossible. You need to have patience. You need to understand it's a process and you need to allow that process to happen. I just talked to the editors of the movie Instigators, which included the three editors have 8 Oscar nominations and an Oscar win between them. And they agreed with this idea that if you presented the finished cut to the director on the first day, he would probably fire them because it's so radically different than what you would expect. You need that process to get to that finished cut. And if you just presented it, they'd be like, what happened to all this other stuff we did? And why isn't it like we scripted? So patience is one of the things. Ego is another one. So many of the editors that I've met and talked to just have no ego. I mean, they have an ego because they're good and because they have something to say, but they're kind and they're not full of themselves. So just having a lovely sense of not too much ego is another one. And the third one is empathy. All of them are empaths. All of them are able to feel something that someone else feels, to be able to take somebody else's life, to be able to take somebody else's performance and see truth in it and understand them empathetically. So I think those are the three: lack of ego, patience, empathetic.
Yes,
Could
those
you
are three very, I'm sorry, we keep interrupting each
go
other.
ahead? I'm sorry.
No,
I'm sorry. We're just so excited.
Becky, go for it.
I'm
no, go
sorry.
for it, Becky.
What could you expand on empathy a little more?
And I expand on empathy. Yeah, I think empathy is important in at least 2 critical ways to an editor. One, every editor that I talk to says, when I ask them, oh, how do you edit? They all say performance is king. Performance is key. You have to be able to watch an actor or in a documentary, watch a human being and find the truth and the kernel of truth in that performance. The only way you can possibly find that kernel of truth in a performance is to be empathetic. If you're, not to be political, if you're Donald Trump, there's no way you're a good editor. You just couldn't possibly do my job. The other thing is to be empathetic to the director. As editors, we are all in service to the director. We are all trying to deliver the director's project. And in order to do that, you have to have empathy with the director. You have to be able to understand how they want to collaborate. You have to understand maybe how scared they are. So many editors, more high-level editors, talk to me about how broken directors are when they come into the cutting room, immediately after shooting, how brutal the shoot was on them, and how fragile the director is when they appear in your cutting room. You need to be empathetic to that. You need to be gentle with them. You need to understand how they feel. So empathy helps in both choosing great performances and being a good collaborator. Being a good collaborator with your assistant editor. I had an assistant editor, and the poor guy. I noticed he was just dragging this one day, and I said, "You know what? You need to go take a nap." And he couldn't believe it. I'm like, "No, you're useless to me right now. Go take a nap. In 40 minutes, you'll be fresh as a daisy and you'll do great work. I could care less. I got things to do. Take a nap and do it." You have to be empathetic to see how somebody's performing. If your assistant or the director or anybody else is having a bad day, that's going to affect them creatively. So you just have to have some empathy and have some feeling for each other as human beings.
No, I completely agree with everything you just said. I think that filmmaking can be a very personal experience, especially when you're the director and you're telling something that's very personal to you. You have like some attachment to it. So I would imagine that being a director in the editing room is kind of a vulnerable moment. So you don't know exactly how things are going to turn out yet. You hope it turns out amazing and it's great, but you're at the same time, you're just like, you're finding the story as you go along in the edit. With that, speaking of directors, Volume 2 opens with a foreword by a little director known by the name of Ron Howard. But just by reading his foreword, it is very clear that he has a very strong admiration and passion for the art of editing and for the artists to do it. So, how are you able to get someone such as high profile as Ron Howard to contribute to this book? Do you share similar philosophies to him on editing, and that's why you wanted to include him, or did you have other filmmakers in mind who you thought might, be good to include in your book?
I'm Steve Hullfish. He begged. No, no, that's not true. I wanted my dream, and I always think that it's a great idea to think of that if you have a dream, if you have one person in mind that you're like, I want this person for my forward, dream big. That's what I say. And really, there's only a handful of directors in the world that everybody knows, right? Who are they? Ridley Scott, Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Ron Howard, Denis Villeneuve. It's a handful. Paul Greengrass. There's maybe 6 or 7 in the entire world that everybody knows as a director. And Ron Howard's one of them. And I also wanted somebody that would really have a lovely feeling for editing, that thought editing was really powerful and important. And I did watch Ron Howard's masterclass, and I could tell he loved editors. And so Ron was the first person I approached, believe it or not. I knew his editor, James Wilcox, who cut 13 Lives with him and cut Genius, the TV series, with him. I also knew his documentary editor, Paul Crowder, who cut the Beatles documentary and the Pavarotti documentary. And I asked them, hey, would you approach him for me? And he said yes. And I suggested that I do an interview with him and then transcribe the interview, turn it into, I would write the forward for him, and then he could expand, which is exactly what we did. So I have an hour-long interview with Ron. He was a lovely human being, so generous. He actually had COVID when I interviewed him, was sick, not feeling well, but he still did it. And then I wrote a forward and then sent it to him, and he used that as the basis, but then he expanded on it massively and wrote such, I mean, when I got it back, I cried. I cried when I read that. It was such a lovely forward that it brought tears, literally brought tears of joy to my eyes.
That's incredible. I love that it brought tears to your eyes because I think like that just shows like how passionate we are about this art form. Steve, you're a great editor. You've been doing this for decades at this point, and the same with Ron Howard. Like you mentioned, he's one of the filmmakers that I think everyone on the planet, regardless of you're in the industry or not, or if you're just a major film fan, everyone knows who Ron Howard is. So I think that it's a great choice to be able to go with him. I do want to go back to the YouTube chat for a quick second. We have a question from Kari Dixon. He says, "Hi, Steve. Thank you for sharing your insights today. My question is, with the industry experiencing a radical transformation, do you see the barriers of entry lowering or becoming more difficult?"
I see them lowering personally. I hope that everyone is able to get into the industry. I know right now people are hurting. I know people who are, as experienced as I am, or even more experienced. I will say I just talked to an Oscar-winning editor, and he said, "Oh man, I haven't worked in a while." And he goes, "I looked to Joe Walker and Jen Lame to see who cut Oppenheimer, to see if those two are working, then maybe the industry's doing better." And he goes, "Neither one of them are really working either." So people are hurting right now. I know it's hard to get maybe to the job that you want on a big TV show or on a film, but I also hope that people will just try to create on their own. You've got YouTube, which, you're listening to right now. You can put anything on YouTube and get millions and millions of views. You can get people who are passionate about what you do. You can get people who love what you do. The director Koganada, I don't know if you know him. He started out by just making YouTube videos. And the next thing you know, he's repped as a director and made a great movie. He's made a couple of great movies, starting with just doing YouTube videos himself. That's possible. I interviewed several years ago a female director of a documentary called Ascension, I think it was. She was nominated for an Oscar, and her crew to be nominated for that Oscar was like 4 people. She was the cinematographer. She was the director. She was the composer. She was the editor.
Yeah.
And she made an Oscar nominated movie with the tools she has access to. You can do it.
It should be said though that like any undertaking into production, or even time spent away from searching for work, or working maybe minimum wage, as some of us have had to do recently in the past couple of years, it is a sacrifice. But I think within those sacrifices there's a lot of discovery of what your own creativity is, and why you want to pursue this. And the passion can come through. And I feel like maybe that's one big reason to reach for Art of the Cut. And was it part of the reason why you undertook it as well, to kind of inspire yourself?
Definitely, the inspiring myself is a big part of Art of the Cut from the very beginning. I did not come up through the typical assistant editor path. When I was 21 years old or 22, I edited my own documentary, and it won national awards. And I never looked back. I never became an assistant editor. I never did anything but be an editor since I was 21 years old. But the problem with that is I've never had a mentor. I've never seen the way anybody else edits. Until I got to Oprah. When I started working at Oprah, there's 30 other editors and you're walking down the halls and sharing stuff. But for a long time in my career, I didn't know how other people did it. I didn't know what was wrong and what was right. I had no one teaching me. And when I started Art of the Cut 10 years ago, I would just cut my first feature film and I didn't even know whether I did it right, to be honest. And so I was doing these interviews more for myself as a learning experience. I'm like, man, these guys are willing to be interviewed by me as long as I put it out there, as a podcast or whatever. I'm going to ask them the questions I want to know. And if you will read those early interviews, they're so obviously me asking questions for myself. So absolutely. And I want to share that. So I'm hoping that the questions that I ask other editors and the things that are presented in the book and the things that are presented in my podcast are things that allow somebody who maybe didn't get a chance to go to film school, or went to film school and now has been, doing a minimum wage job and they're feeling a little hopeless. I want them to be inspired and to feel like they have a mentor and a friend that is showing them all the ways it can be done. So it's definitely a book that I wish I had 40 years ago.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something that we'll be talking about in our upcoming resume workshop. The importance of reaching out to possible mentors and cold messaging, and how to bring in a community of mentors around you.
Mentors are big, and the other interesting thing that is talked about in the assistant editor chapter of the book is the importance of reaching out to somebody who's at your same level.
Yeah.
That you might not have a chance
Absolutely.
of getting to Ron Howard, and maybe you couldn't even get to his editor, but you could maybe get to his second assistant editor and ask for coffee, and that person might be able to bring you up underneath of them or make that connection because you're two 24-year-olds or something like that, instead of trying to find somebody that's further up the chain that's a little busier.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my experience, I just find that the people in this industry are generally very nice, very welcoming. They're always like willing to give advice. Like I've cold emailed assistants and editors, like just to have a sort of informational interview with them. And a lot of them have very graciously donated their time to be able to do that. And I think that this book is kind of like that in a way. It's like you have like all of these interviews with all of these incredible editors, and it's almost just like you're talking to them kind of in a way. It's like you're hearing them, you know, have like all the same questions that everyone else does. So I very much I think I'm gonna use this book moving forward throughout the rest of my career. And I think
Thank you.
no, we can say the same. I think Becky can agree with that too, and everyone watching this stream.
Yeah, I would
So
also
thank you very
say,
much.
yeah, I would also say it gives you an eye for like jargon if you're just starting. As you said, if you haven't been to film school, if you haven't had those initial conversations, can give you a sense for how editors think, which maybe can be quite intense and quite opinionated. There's a whole range. We have a question from YouTube. I'm just going to read it out. Ashley McKinney says, "Hey
Our
Steve,
very own
thanks so much."
Ashley.
Hi,
Oh
Ashley.
yes. Thank you so much for doing this. What are some tools and tips on how to move into the editor's chair as an assistant editor? Kind of what we've been talking about, but making that jump from up here to there.
You'll have to read the assistant editor chapter. um, honestly, that's the truth. But the way you move up, I'll tell an anecdote. I worked on a movie, and there were a bunch of PAs, and the PAs were very green, and we didn't even separate them into camera PAs and editing PAs or any of that stuff. They just, hey, we got a bunch of PAs. And as I was editing near set, so I was able to see many of them. And there was this one woman, I should say, I was going to say girl because she was pretty young, but there was this one woman who impressed every single person in every department in every of the crew. Like her desire to do, to work hard, to be enthusiastic, to at smart times ask questions that you knew she wanted to ask. Everybody wanted her as the PA in their department. And I think she started out like in costumes, like the person that would run the talent back and forth from the costuming department to the set, when they got finished getting made up. And I thought she was just brilliant. And she saw me editing and she would come and watch, and she thought it was really cool. She was not an editor. And I thought she would make a great assistant. And so I slowly started teaching her the things that you need to know to be an assistant editor. And she became the assistant editor, went from PA to assistant editor on that job. And now she's directing. I just saw something on YouTube, a brilliant short film that she directed. So she's gone on to great things. I think that showing your passion is a huge part of it. If people see how passionate you are without being annoying, you can't be passionate and like, cloying and on top of you all the time. But if people see how much you want to do it, how socially aware you are to ask the right questions at the right time, to back off and not talk when, they shouldn't be talking, that's going to get you those opportunities. You also have to be an advocate for yourself. There's lots of editors that will tell you, well, you need to let me know you want to cut. I'm not just going to give you a scene to cut because I want to. You have to let me know that that's something you want to do. So you need to do that. You need to have the awareness to, when the director is around, to be socially, cognizant and self-aware and know the right things to say. And I think that'll get you where you want to go. In the assistant editor chapter of the book, there are a lot of examples of assistant editors telling exactly what it was that got them from the assistant editor chair to the editor chair.
So basically, just read the book and you'll find all the information that you need on how to do that.
True, but I wanted to, I did want to share an anecdote and kind of point out so you don't have to buy the book.
Yeah, you gave us a very good answer. Thank you, Steve.
No, absolutely. I mean, I would imagine that the making of this book must have been very similar to kind of making a documentary in a way, because, when you're making a doc, you have a very rough idea of the story that you want to tell. But unlike a narrative feature film, there is no outline. You don't have a script. Oftentimes, things come up that you never would have expected. So as you continue to research and conduct these interviews, sometimes the story can take an unexpected turn. So what are some of the most unexpected things that you learned while researching, doing the interviews, and how did they shape the book, but also your perspective on editing?
Well, it's very insightful to say that it was like cutting a documentary, because it is. The number of interviews that I had at the time when I was creating the book was about a little over 300 interviews. I'd already done 50. I couldn't use those. I'm going to do an Art of the Cut 3, by the way, which I'm working on right now, which is just documentary. So I pulled all the documentary interviews out, and those are not included in volume 2. The first 50 aren't included. So I'm left with about 300 interviews. And that's 3 million words of transcripts. And I went through,
Wow.
I would go through, this took me 5 years to do, because I'm editing during the day. I've got a job. I've got a 9 to 5, or, as an editor, I've got a 12 to, a 10 to 10. I've got a 12-hour day. And then I would sit, with my laptop in my lap and look at a transcript from an interview, first transcript. And I would break each paragraph, like, what is this paragraph? What's the topic? What is this about? And I would open a Word document about that topic, and I would place the paragraph in there. And I would go through the entire interview, pulling out, oh, this is about pacing. This is about story. This is about structure. This is about collaboration with the director. This is about collaboration with other editors. This is about being an assistant editor. This is about VFX. And I would just build these Word documents. Some of the Word documents were 200 pages long, just one topic, and I had 170 topics.
That's a
So
lot.
I went through and then I saw, oh, this is a really good topic. This has got a lot of meat to it. It's a lot of people commented. So now I'm going to turn this into a chapter. And I would go through and find the best moments. And then also to try to find the moments that talk to each other, either editors, one editor disagreeing with another editor. Like one editor would say, oh, yeah, I always edit with music. Music inspires me. So I put the music in and then I edit over the music. And other people say, no, no, no. You never put the music in until months down the road. You want to have the entire movie edited before you put any music in. Like, oh, let's put those two comments next to each other, that kind of thing. So it was really building those chapters of topics from all the different interviews, arranging them so that they had created a conversation. And then, that was basically how I did it.
And yeah, like I think that the juxtaposition of like the differing views of editors like worked so brilliantly in this book. And it was something that constantly surprised me in whatever chapter I was reading. Like particularly like I think I found that the chapter on dailies was like the most fascinating one in the book, in my opinion. At least I was particularly shocked when I read that Nathan Orloff, who, for those who don't know, he is the editor on Ghostbusters Afterlife. He said that he doesn't watch his dailies. And that was something that I was like, wait, what? How do you not, how, I just, my mind couldn't process that. It's like, how do you not watch your dailies before getting into it? But then we have like I think I don't know if it was immediately the next paragraph, but it was somewhere close by. We have Carol Littleton, who like she watches her dailies religiously and she take notes. So and I think that is very valuable information to show like the differing views of things, whether it be for students who are looking to get into editing or even industry veterans. So with that, I was curious, what value do you think that it holds for students to experiment with how they approach things and to hear about these different methods used by the professionals who cut some of their favorite films? And the same for industry veterans who have been in this industry for years.
Yeah, well, I didn't have I love my college experience, but I didn't have a great one personally. Partly because I thought I was smarter than everybody that was a professor for me. But I did want to have this book show the professors basically there's a lot of different ways to do things, and you cannot prescribe to your students one way. It just is impossible, and it's wrong. It's creatively wrong. And I think I miss Becky. Where's Becky? Becky pointed this out, was that it's not just the way you want to work, but sometimes it's the way the project wants you to work. In other words, I might always want to do one specific way. Like I want to do, I don't know. I don't want to watch my dailies all at the same time. I want to watch them like Nathan Orloff did. And sure, that works maybe with one director, but with a different director, I find that it doesn't work because of the way they shoot. And so now I've got to watch dailies like Carol Littleton. Well, that's why in the book, there's different ways, because not every person has their brain works the same way. Not every person, the project works the same way. I tell this story a lot that believe it or not, I used to do martial arts. And one of the things that they teach you is like, you'll learn for a knife, like if somebody sticks a knife in your face, like jabs at me, my hand isn't showing up. If somebody does that to you, they teach you like 20 different ways to defend against that. Well, why do they do that? Well, because the attacker could be a different size person. And I could be different size. Like they could try to teach Becky how to defend herself from that knife attack and teach me, who is a 220 pound, 6 foot tall man, we would defend ourselves differently. Becky and I would, because of the weight, our size, because of our strength. Maybe she's more flexible than I am, so she could kick the knife out of the hand. I couldn't do that. I couldn't get my leg up high enough. So not only do you have to feel comfortable, like I would feel comfortable, oh, here's how I like to do it, but it also depends on the assailant. It depends on the project. Oh, the film wants me to edit it differently. So therefore, I need a bunch of different options to edit differently. And this book gives them to you. Find something that's comfortable for you. And what's comfortable for you on this project might not work on the next project. So, I could go back to Art of the Cut and go, oh, there was another way to do it. Oh, that would work on this project.
Yeah, I think that's something that I completely agree with. I think that a lot of students, where they're in film school, they're a little naive in a way which, I mean, you're a student, so you're supposed to be naive, but they think that like every film or TV show is done the same way. But I mean, I've been working professionally for a couple years now. I can't think of, even if it was just a slight difference, there was never a production that was exactly the same as the other. And I think that this book does a great job of highlighting that. I'm gonna go back to the YouTube live questions for a quick second. First up, we have Phil, who says, Art of the Cut was a big help for me when I was transitioning from doc to scripted and was given to me by a mentor in scripted who was cutting on a documentary I was the AE on. How much different was writing volume 2 as opposed to volume 1?
They were basically the same. Believe it or not, embarrassing story, because I'm an old guy. Volume 1, the way I did it, and there were only 50 interviews, but that's probably 1,000 pages of transcripts. I printed out 1,000 pages of transcripts and sat with a paper cutter and cut each paragraph up and placed each piece of paper with a topic on a pile in a table and had all these piles of paper. And that's how I built book 1. Book 2, I did electronically, where I actually copied and pasted from one Word document to another. But not too much different. They're very fairly similar. I love the fact that a mentor gave it to him. There's a lot of discussion. I'm working, as I said, on volume 3, which is exclusively about cutting documentary. And there's a whole chapter on what are the muscles that you use in documentary that can also be used in scripted, because there's a lot of crossover, I think. And I really think documentary editors are the unsung heroes of our field. They're the real masters of the craft. And so many editors, so many huge Oscar-winning feature film editors say it's the documentary people that I look up to.
Yeah, because documentary, it's a different field entirely from working on narrative films. We have a question from Sarah Juliet DeSimone. Question from Gravesend, Brooklyn. Do you have any advice for a commercial TV editor with experience in long-form scripted content and documentaries who wants to transition into editing scripted TV shows? The two worlds seem so different that it feels like starting as an AE and working your way up might be necessary. Any thoughts on the best way to make this switch?
Yeah, there would be two ways. There are people that I think I interviewed Chad Galster. Chad Galster just cut all the Yellowstone TV series and the spinoffs from Yellowstone, 1924 and 1886, or whatever the TV shows were. Yellowstone, anyhow. He was the editor on Yellowstone, and he got that gig because the director asked somebody, who's the best reality show editor that you know? Because he wanted a guy or a person, an editor. He wanted an editor that had that mentality of a reality show editor, to like make something from nothing, basically, or to build something that wasn't specifically scripted to be that way. That's what he wanted. And so he made the jump because the director was looking for that person. There's a couple of other documentary and reality editors that got the chance because the director realized either they'd seen a documentary and realized how well edited it was, and even though it was a documentary, not a feature, they thought that person could do it, and they just promoted them into the position. Otherwise, you do have to kind of got to start back as an assistant editor. And I don't know how old that person is, but there's some old assistant editors. So do it while you're still young.
There's no shame in that, of course. I mean,
No.
there's plenty. There's plenty
I've talked to so many people that
editors.
the assistant editor, the word assistant editor is just a bad word. It's like assistant director, right? An assistant director and a director, you think, oh, he assists the director. No, it's a totally different job title. Mm-hmm. Assistant editor is a title that is very different and has different skill sets and stuff than the editor. And I don't know why it's even called an assistant editor, to be honest. It just doesn't seem right.
Yes. And also from YouTube, we have a question from Sarang. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name, by the way. Hi, Steve. Sarang here. I really enjoy your podcast and appreciate you taking the time to give us such valuable insight. My question is, after interviewing editors working in varied domains like docs and narrative, were there any observations you came to with how experience from one genre / type of film or TV impact a different style?
Yeah, I just kind of answered that question with the thing about Chad Galster. I think that it's such a cliche to say that we're all storytellers, but documentary editors have to be such storytellers. You're taking something that was not meant to be put together and figuring out what's interesting about it, how to tell that story. Do you start at the beginning? Do you start in the middle? How do you transition from one part of the story to another? And if you have those skills to tell story, that's everything else is going to come, and might not come easily, but it will come. And I think that the skills are transferable. And possible. And honestly, there are so many editors. The narrative editors, like I said, are in awe of the doc editors. So if you're a doc editor and can prove it, you have some respect from your peers.
Yeah, because that's a different craft entirely, and you never know what curveballs are going to be thrown at you. I mean, of course, on any production, whether it's narrative or documentary, there's always going to be curveballs thrown at you. But in documentary specifically, you just never know what is going to happen as you're literally finding the story. So I myself, I do have a lot of respect for documentary editors, and like they deserve all the praise in the world, in my opinion. And so yeah, so obviously, uh, I went to film school, and you're a teacher yourself. And in my experience in film school, all of the editing courses really only focused on the more creative aspects of editing, like such as crafting an actor's performance or finding the right music or the pacing and stuff like that. I love how this book goes so much further beyond that. And for that reason, I mean, we probably established this already, but I do think that this book should be a required reading in every film school. Because I'm gonna be completely honest with you, like I've had fabulous professors over the years throughout my entire film school career, going back to high school and college, graduate school. But I didn't really pick up the more organizational, technical, and social skills of the editing room until I started working professionally. And for that, I was wondering, why don't you think that these types of skills are emphasized more in film school? Was this something that you had in mind when you started working on Art of the Cut? And how do you think that film schools can take inspiration from your book to improve the ways that they teach the art of editing?
I do think that the kind of instruction you're talking about is very difficult for a college professor to do. It's easy to give you an assignment to say, oh, here's some footage, cut it together, and then critique it, based on your, the professor's understanding of what good editing is. But to be able, how do you teach personal interaction? Like, how can you do it? What assignment can you give to a student? What homework do you assign? There's none. I mean, I guess there could be. There's a great anecdote in the book from William Goldenberg, I think. William Goldenberg talks about he edited under the great Michael Kahn, Steven Spielberg's editor, and Michael gave him a scene to cut, and Billy cut it, and Michael critiqued it. So Billy fixed it and gave it back to Michael, and Michael critiqued it again. And Billy fixed it and gave it back, and Michael critiqued it again, and blah, 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 blah. And it kept going on and on and on and on. And Billy finally said, I'm never going to be an editor. It's never right. And Michael said, I'm not criticizing you because I think the editing is bad. I'm criticizing you because you need to be able to see how to take criticism.
Mm-hmm.
You need the social skill to be able to hear me, incorporate my desires and my thoughts, and change the edit, and also not yell at me and not tell me your way is better. I mean, there's so much. So it's just, the personal interaction stuff is so difficult to teach. So you could say, okay, I want you to edit, you give two students in your class, you go pair up into twos, you cut something, student A cut something, student B complain about it, give notes on it, and vice versa. And you have to keep doing that over and over and over and over again. Keep giving notes. There's no perfect. There's only giving notes. And you see how that goes. How do they interact with each other? How do they relate to the note? How do they collaborate? How do they not break down in tears because there's no getting it right? So it's very difficult to do. And I think that the book is a great way for a college professor to say, look at these examples of collaboration. Look at these examples of taking notes. Look at these examples of the process, and how the process is not just one perfect edit, but something that has to go on and on and on and change and adapt to context. So I hope the book's good for that.
Yeah, I think that this book would have been very valuable to me if I had had it around when I was in college almost a decade ago. But again, like, there are things, as you just mentioned, that are very difficult to sort of replicate in a college setting, like with giving notes and stuff like that. Just getting a note from your peers or even from your professors is very different from getting a note from a director or an executive at the studio
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. Or even like the key relationship between an editor and his assistant. Like, how do you replicate that in a college setting?
Very difficult.
You
That's
can,
one of the good
especially.
things about the book, is that it's hard to teach, but you can read about it and you can see an anecdote. And I definitely provide those anecdotes. And if they're not specifically in the book, you should be listening to the podcast because it's free. And it just gives you, as Becky pointed out earlier, it gives you the lingo. It gives you the way, it shows you how two editors talk to each other. And especially when I'm talking to multiple editors, you're able to hear not just the lingo, but the way they relate to each other and the way they talk to each other, and the way you hear the conversations about a director who, maybe is crazy and how you have to deal with that, or a fantastic director and how you're trying to live up to that. And you're like, oh man, I hope I get that experience sometime in my life.
Yes, I mean, we all want a wonderful experience like that. And I think that as the younger generations start to come in, that's going to be something that is going to be kind of more attainable. I think that editing is something that has become so much more accessible over the past couple of decades. Before, we used to have NLEs like Avid, which were pretty much only available to industry professionals or even college students at their campuses. But nowadays we have free software like DaVinci Resolve, which like any single person on the planet can get it.
Yep.
And we have, and even like things like I kind of hate to say this a little bit, but social media like Instagram and TikTok, like stuff like that is allowing teenagers and kids to have the most very basic understanding of what editing is at a very young age. And, nowadays, kids are basically coming out of the womb with iPhones and iPads, and they have access to all of these things. And, they all have cameras and editing apps. And so, what I was curious about is as this generation who is pretty much trained since they were a child, how do you think that the art of editing is going to continue to evolve? I mean, you already said that you're doing a third volume of Art of the Cut, but let's say like 10 years from now, when you're doing a fourth or a fifth version, and now we have Gen Z and Gen Alpha editors out there working in the field, what kind of things do you think they might say?
I don't know how much it's going to change. I think it will change. I just interviewed somebody that I noticed they used a jump cut in a strange place. I thought it was good. It was a good cut. But I asked him about it. And he goes, people are on YouTube all the time and watching social media edits and stuff, and jump cuts, nobody cares. Like you watch some social media post from somebody and there's literally 20 jump cuts in the social media post. He goes, it's part of our lexicon. It's part of the social construct of how we see editing is through social media and YouTube and how that works. Just like, when I was coming up, it was the beginning of MTV and you're like, whoa, this totally changes things. This is not your grandfather's editing. You can do crazy stuff in a music video. So that is going to change. Did you watch the last animated Spider-Man movie? I mean, holy cow.
Yes, it was incredible.
Insanity with
Mhm.
editing. Like I couldn't believe the editing of that and the complexity of it and the inner frame stuff and the mixes of media. I think that's going to be more and more the case of people incorporating that stuff. Or you look at the new Pharrell documentary that's all Lego. It's a documentary
Yes.
in Legos. What the
Mhm.
heck? That's crazy. It's a great documentary. It's super cool looking, but I would never think you could do a documentary with animated Legos. What the heck?
Yeah, I saw that trailer and I think it looks super creative. It's
Oh yeah.
personally something that I'm excited to see. I
My
really do
dog
love
is
how you mentioned, oh, I'm sorry.
my dog is here, needs to be petted. So if you're wondering what I'm doing with my hands, my dog is needy.
No,
Stella.
hey, we all love our dogs
Come
here.
here. Come here.
No, I was gonna say, like, I do love how you mentioned recent Spider-Man, Across the Spider-Verse, because oh my God, he's so cute.
Hello, Stella. Say hello.
Hello. Well, no,
Yeah,
like I was just
Spider-Verse.
about to
Yeah.
say, because there's actually a section in that film. There's like a Lego section in that film, which was actually entirely animated and edited by a child,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah, because he like a couple months before the film came out, like they did a trailer for it, and this kid, like 10-year-old kid, recreated the trailer in Lego form, and like the directors liked it so much that they hired him like to do a part in the movie, which
Yep.
is I don't know, like that kid is going places.
Yeah,
He's
but
super
you were
talented.
asking like, is somebody asked, is it harder to get into the industry or easier? And here's like a 13-year-old kid that got to participate in one of the biggest brands in the world
Hmm.
because
Right.
he did it. Like if a 13-year-old kid can do a Marvel movie, Okay, it's pretty open.
We can all do it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much to say, so much to say. Could go on forever. But I do really appreciate how you dedicated an entire chapter to the assistant editor, which you already mentioned before. I will die on the hill that AEs are the unsung heroes of the editing room of any
Amen.
post-production team.
Amen.
I don't think, yeah, I don't think that newcomers to the field, even those who are aspiring to be editors, don't fully grasp what an assistant editor actually does or how valuable they actually are. Like, I'm going to admit it myself, like, I'm an assistant editor myself. I didn't fully know what an assistant editor actually did until I started doing it myself. So, why was it so important for you to include conversations about editors and their assistants? Are there things that you think might get overlooked about this key relationship that you hope that both seasoned industry veterans and those aspiring editors looking to get their foot in the door take with them upon reading the book?
Well, number one, as you point out, every editing room lives on its assistant editor. I mean, there's no other way around it. So I had to have the chapter in the book because it's such a critical aspect of an editing room, whether you're an assistant or you're an editor. Two, so many people come up through the assistant editing ranks that this book is meant to be aspirational. I mean, it's one of the things that I want people to read this book and go, I could do that. You know, I might live in Iowa, I might live in Chicago, but I could be working on my favorite TV show. I could be working on that movie that I watched last night that I loved. I can do it. And I want people to feel like that. And one of the most common ways you get to that point is as an assistant editor, right? So I felt like it was important just from the aspirational aspect to put it in there. It was important to put the assistant editor in there because it is so critical to the editing process. I remember back in 1996, I got named an avid master editor. And we, as avid master editors, we went to this super cool week-long class. There were only 12 of us, and they brought in Hollywood feature editors. And what I was absolutely struck by, because I'm a really technical, like I know everything about Avid. I had a boss that used to say, ask him a question about Avid. If he can't answer it, I'll give you $20. So I knew everything about Avid. And we had these Hollywood editors, and they barely knew JKL and in and out. Like that was all they could do because their assistant
Oh,
editor
wow.
did so much. I'm like, this guy's an Oscar winner. How does he not know how to use the software? But he didn't need to. His job was marking it in, marking it out, and cutting it into the timeline. That is basically it. Because the storytelling ability and knowing where the in and the out went, everything else, the guy just relied on his assistants to do. And that's where I realized, one, how important the assistant is, and two, how the editor's job is not being great at the technical stuff; it's being great at the storytelling and the skills and the pace and all of the artistic stuff that you were saying that you learned in film school.
Yeah, like that kind of stuff is you're kind of amazed at like what editors don't know. And I
Yeah.
don't mean that to like the great editors. Like they're amazing. But I've worked on shows before where like the editors would like come to me or one of the other AEs like, help, I don't know what's going on here, like with a technical question or stuff like that.
Right.
So
100% true.
yes. So please, I want a shirt that says AEs are the heroes of post-production. Someone make that, please.
Amen.
So unfortunately, we are running out of time. So I do want to throw like one last
Any more
question to
questions
you
from the peanut gallery?
from the peanut gallery. I have not seen any, but I just do want to say,
Hi again, Steve from Suzette. I was wondering if you had any advice
oh,
on
there she
networking
is.
events. For example, when someone comes to you, what makes them stand out or is memorable to you. Um, I'll get to that, but I want to tell a great story. This is in the book. This is the best networking idea that I have ever heard in my life. And so I will share this. This is from the book. A guy was like a marketing type editor, which I've done myself, marketing kind of projects. And he wanted to break into narrative scripted and tried to figure out how to do it. And what he did was he went to, specifically in this instance, he went to Sundance, but you don't have to go to Sundance. He went to a film festival, which many states, many cities, of course, New York has film festivals. And he went to the short film. He went to every single short film presentation at the festival. And a lot of these film festivals have little catalogs and stuff, so you can tell something about the project. And he went specifically to the short films that were edited by the director. And he said, I bet that director would rather have somebody else edit his film. So he went to every one of the screenings of short films edited by directors and said, I would love to edit your next film. And sure enough, he got a bite from somebody who allowed him for free to edit their next feature film. And that film got them a huge Marvel movie. And within 2 movies, he went from being cutting local TV commercials to cutting a Marvel movie because of this great networking idea of going to film festivals. And because at a film festival, I don't know if you've ever gone to a film festival, but the directors usually are there at the front of the movie theater. They're at the screen. They're there to soak up the glory of people watching their movie. They want you to talk to them. They want people to go up and tell them what a great movie it is. And it was so inspirational. And were you inspired by Kurosawa? They want you to ask those kind of questions. So I would suggest doing that. For me personally, if you approach me at a networking event, it would all be about passion. It would be about me wanting to know you personally. Tell me an interesting story about you. Maybe, you've hopefully read my book. What was a great quote that you loved? Well, hopefully it's a quote that I love too, and then we can talk about my quote. Or if you're going to meet an editor, you think there's a possibility you're going to an ACE event, maybe in New York City, who might be there? Oh, Jamie Kirkpatrick might be there. Oh, I should watch Old Henry, and I should watch Greedy People and 9 Days and have something to talk to him about. You go up to him like, oh my gosh, Jamie, that one edit you did in 9 days was so brilliant where you did this and this. And his face will light up like $1 million. That's all you have to do. You don't want to go to him and say, by the way, I am certified in After Effects and in Resolve, and I'm certified, nobody cares. Nobody could give a shit. But, be human, explain how passionate you are, make some kind of a connection about your life. I would rather know like what you do for a hobby. Like, tell me you love crocheting. Like, okay, that's kind of interesting, but tell me more about crocheting. Like, let's have a human conversation. That's what I want to know. I want to know whether I'm going to like you if I hire you as my assistant or second assistant or production PA or whatever. Am I going to like you in the lunchroom? That's what I want to know. If we have to sit together at lunch, are we going to get along? That's all I really care about.
Yes, absolutely. Because your talent as an assistant editor is one thing, but if you're not someone who is pleasant to be in the room with for 12 hours, like that takes a toll on everyone in the room. So I think that's super, super important. We have one final question from the YouTube chat from Harm's House. It says, jumping in late, so if this has already been discussed, you can disregard. Does location determine your ability to move along in your career? Thank you for sharing your insights.
Yeah, sadly, I think it does. I'm in Chicago, which is not a great place to be, except for, when I was worked up for Oprah for a decade. She was here. So therefore, this was a great place to be. If you wanted to work for Oprah, if you wanted to work for anybody else, probably not. You really do need to work in LA and New York mostly. I talked earlier today about the assistant editor that I had. I thought he was a really good guy. I thought he was super, like anybody would love him, and he wanted to get to Hollywood. And I'm pretty well known, and I have a lot of friends in LA, and I tried to get him a job. And I said, hey, this guy's really good. I think you'd love him. You should hire him. And across the board, every single person that I personally suggested and vouched for this guy, no one would take him. They said he has to move to LA first. And so I said, I told him he knew, he was hearing the same people say this over and over again. He just had to make the jump. And so he saved up enough money, moved to LA, and within a week, the people that I had recommended that he work with, once he was in LA, then they took him. But they wouldn't take him ahead of time. They wouldn't promise him a job until he got out there. He had to be out there first. So yes, Atlanta, you could definitely get a job in Atlanta. You can definitely get a job in New York. You can definitely get a job in LA, Toronto, Vancouver. That's about it. Chicago, it's only because I don't want to leave, and a lot of the work that I do, I'm not in Chicago. Either it's remote work, or I go to Atlanta a lot. Go to Atlanta. I went to New York City for almost a full year last year. So that's where you have to go to get the jobs.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of a shame personally hearing that about Chicago because I've been there before and I absolutely fell in love with that city. I think it's a terrific city. But I mean, for career purposes, especially me, I'm still relatively new to the industry. That just doesn't work for me. That
Yeah.
it's a city that I would move to if I could. But
Chicago's a
anyway,
great city, and you could get a job here as a documentary editor. There's 3 or 4 documentary houses that if you could get into one of those documentary houses, then you could live in Chicago. But other than that, there are very few Chicago film editors.
so basically, we need to start bringing more posts to Chicago and have more people
Please.
have that become like we have LA. Obviously, that's the Hollywood of the West. New York slash New Jersey is becoming the Hollywood East. We need a central Hollywood.
Sure.
Chicago would be
Well,
perfect for that.
they call Chicago the third coast. So
Yes. So anyway, Steve, this has been an absolute pleasure. I do want to thank you for your time. And unfortunately, as much fun as this has been, like we are running out of time. So I just want to ask you one final thing about the book, and that is if there's only one thing that anyone who reads this book takes away with them, what do you think it is and why?
I think I've already mentioned it, which is that I want people to realize that how they edit is fine. It- there are so many ways to edit. There are so many approaches. There are so many ways to do things that however you do them, that's fine. You don't have to do it like somebody else. Just do it like you. Uh, Raul explained how Nathan Orloff watches dailies differently than Carol Littleton. They're both great editors. You don't have to watch dailies the same way. You don't have to organize your bins the same way. You don't have to approach a new scene the same way. Somebody edits with selects reels. Somebody edits with a string out. Somebody edits with just going into individual clips in a bin and edits them that way, linearly. Some people edit, they find the core of the scene and edit backwards. And other people go, how do you edit backwards? Like, well, I do. That's the way I do it. So I just want people to understand that whatever your creative process is, own it, feel good about it, but also realize that you might want to change it. That today you might do it one way, but on the next project, or maybe even tomorrow, you might want to do it a different way. I talked to an editor who said, I approach scenes differently every single morning. Like one day I'll do a string out, the next day I won't. One day I'll watch the dailies backwards, the next day I'll watch them forwards, because it's monotonous. So they change up their approach every single day. So that's basically my takeaway from this is you have 300 editors telling you how they edit. And I think that's valuable compared to one editor writing a book and explaining how they do it, because that's just one person.
Yes, so it's just one person, several varying different opinions on how things are done. And if you would like to read about all of those opinions, again, Art of the Cut Volume 2, it is available now. You can go and pick it up at your local bookstore or on Amazon, Kindle, however you can read it. And
And
it's a
Routledge, by the way, the publishing site Routledge, Routledge, if you go there, I think they have a discount.
oh,
Let me see
see,
if I
there
can,
we go.
yeah, talk a little bit, and I'll see if I can go onto Routledge and see if I can get a link for everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much. That would be terrific to get like the people watching a little discount. It's super educational. I think that if, whether you're an industry veteran or if you're just looking to break in or you're a student, it's a very valuable book.
Yeah,
So,
there's a good discount on it. Um, so I can copy and paste this. I can put it in the. I guess I need to go. I don't have the YouTube thing up. I can put it in the Zoom link. Maybe you can copy and
okay.
paste it and put it in the
Yes.
YouTube link. But that's $39.99 for the ebook or the paperback, which I think is $10 less than Amazon, maybe five
Yes.
dollars less.
Yes, I just put it in the YouTube chat. So again, thank you so much for your generosity and for your time with us today. I think everyone on the live stream truly appreciates it. And yeah, I mean, thank you to everyone who is joining us on this live stream. We truly appreciate it, and we hope that to be able to do more events like this, more sort of virtual community educational events. So if you like this, please let us know and we'll keep doing them. And of course, I could not end this without thanking everyone else on the New York City committee for Blue Collared Post Collective. We could not have done this without you guys, and as well as the larger BCPC community. Just thank you, everyone. And with that, we will be signing off.